to another one that looked ancient. After finding the button to check in, I was able to scroll through to select my seat, ensure all of the information was correct, agree to having nothing dangerous, and then I was all checked in and ready to go.
So now that I'm all checked in, we're gonna head inside and grab our boarding pass. But remember, after this flight, we're going to be flying Spirit to see if they're actually America's worst airline.
And I'm warning you now, it's gonna be bad. So after making my way inside, I made my way through the terminal until I found the Delta check-in area. To get my boarding pass, all I had to do was use one of the various kiosks, scan my passport, make sure all of the information was correct, and then I was able to print my boarding pass out and I was ready to go.
So surprisingly, that was actually a super smooth check-in experience, considering the last time I flew Delta, they made me go to customer service and it was a whole ordeal. But now that we actually have our boarding pass, we're gonna head through security because I have a little bit of a surprise planned for us.
So after making my way upstairs, I was greeted by a giant pink flamingo before trying to find where I needed to go. At this airport, all of the check-ins occur in the main hub and all of the gates are in these external areas. So after looking around and finding the right one, I scanned my boarding pass before boarding the SkyTrain, which took me over to the other terminal where I was able to make my way through security.
So now that we're finally through security, I can let you guys know about that surprise. So because I'm flying Delta and I have the right credit card, I actually have access to their Delta Sky Club Lounge, which is normally reserved for business class passengers. So let's go check it out because I know you guys are gonna want to see this.
And if you didn't already know, the Delta Sky Club lounges have a reputation for being some of the best ones out there, so it'll be interesting to see what it's really like.
Hi there. Oh no, it's down, don't worry.
It's off?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Making my way into the lounge, I noticed there was tons of areas for seating and views overlooking the entire terminal below, but what really matters is the food. For breakfast, there was hard-boiled eggs, fruits, salads, yogurt and other dairy products, tons of various pastries which looked absolutely delicious, scrambled eggs, turkey sausages, breakfast potatoes, Thai or vegetable soup, and a ton of drinks to choose from. So obviously, I decided to load up on the delicious food, but then the lunch menu came out. This time, there were 5 different types of salad, cheese, crackers, lunch meats, buns, sandwiches, chicken, rice, and overall this was one of the best lounges I have been to.
So overall I have to give the Delta Sky Club a solid 8 out of 10. The food was really good, the staff were also super nice, and the only real downside that I could think of is it was definitely more dated than some of the other lounges that I've been to, which is why I'm only giving it an 8 out of 10. But anyways, while I'm here waiting for the flight to board, which is in about 20 minutes, I thought I'd tell you guys a little bit more about Delta, just so we all know what to expect.
Right off the bat, Delta was ranked the #1 domestic airline for on-time arrivals, service, and comfort. And to make things even more credible, there were multiple publishers who echoed the very same sentiment. On top of that, they were also awarded the best airline and best staff in North America 2 years in a row, won official awards from Skytrax, and is one of the best in-flight services out there. But what do the people like us have to say? Starting things off, people call it one of the best airlines, calling them a great travel choice, that they've saved the day with their customer service and went above and beyond to track down lost luggage. And on the other hand, the only negative things I could find were people complaining about bag handling and poor check-in experiences, but overall things appear to be quite good.
In full transparency, I've never flown Delta's economy before. I've only ever done their business class, so this is going to be super interesting. But it looks like the flight's arrived, so let's go on board.
Today, I'm going to be flying on one of Delta's 757s, which is super exciting because I've never flown on one of these before.
Thank you.
Making my way towards the plane, I was super excited to try Delta after hearing all of the reviews. But before I get on board, make sure to sign up to my free newsletter, Nomad to Luxury, using the link down in the description, because this is where I go into even more detail about my experiences and help you find better ways to travel. But anyways, it's time for the flight. Making my way onto the plane, I was surprised at just how big it actually was before heading through the cabin towards my seat. Right off the bat, doing the initial comfort test, I was pretty impressed by how comfortable it was, including the headrest. And making my way under the seat, I noticed there was a pretty solid amount of room for bags, but to make things even better, there was also a power adapter, which is super rare on domestic flights these days. Moving back to the seat, I was actually quite happy with the amount of legroom, being only 5'8", and even if you're a little bit taller, you'd still be able to be quite comfortable. And on top of that, there was also a button on the armrest, which gave a pretty solid amount of recline as well. Making my way to the overhead, I was happy to see that the reading light and air conditioning were both working. But what was even more impressive was just how much bin space there was, especially considering this was only a single aisle aircraft. But anyways, where I was sitting for today's flight, I only had access to one window, and soon after the plane was fully boarded, we began pushing back from the gate to head towards the runway. For today's first flight, I'll be flying about an hour and a half from Tampa to Atlanta, and soon after reaching the runway, it was time for takeoff. Now that we were in the air, the crew came around to give out some headphones for the in-flight entertainment, which was super nice to see. And speaking of that, I think we should check it out. The first thing I noticed was the headphone jack and another port for USB devices, and after choosing my language, it was time to start exploring. Starting off with the movies, I was super impressed with just how many there were to choose from. And on top of that, if you're more of a series person, there were also a ton of choices. Now, I have never seen this before on an airline since I'm Canadian, but on Delta, passengers have access to live TV. Another cool feature I noticed as well was the information page, which gave details about the flight. And if you like to explore the world like me, the interactive map was also quite responsive for a screen this size. After finishing with the TV, it was time to explore the rest of the seats, starting with the pouch, which was a decent size and also came with the typical safety pamphlet, which was in pretty good condition, along with a garbage bag in case you get sick. Now earlier, when I was boarding the flight, you may have noticed that there was Wi-Fi on board, and unlike some of the other airlines out there, all you need to do is sign into your SkyMiles account, and then you get free access to Wi-Fi for the entire flight, and surprisingly, it was pretty quick. Now, I'll be honest, up to this point, I was pretty blown away with everything, including how clean it all was. But to make things even better, now it was time for the in-flight snacks. Pulling out my tray table, I was happy to see it was quite large, and for snacks, I got sun chips and water before checking out the bathroom, which was really the only downside of this flight, being quite gross. But after making my way back to my seat, we had begun our descent into Atlanta before coming in for landing. And remember, now we have to fly Spirit, which is considered to be America's worst airline, so it's time to see just how they compare to Delta.
So I have to admit, the Delta economy experience definitely lives up to the title. The staff were incredibly friendly, the seats were super comfortable, the entertainment was unreal. Maybe it's just a Canadian thing, but I have never been on an airline where they've offered live TV before. And on top of that, on a 2-hour domestic flight, having the in-flight entertainment was unreal. Pretty much the only complaint that I do have about it was a little bit on the tighter end. The legroom was good, but when it's a 3x3, you're a little bit crunched up. But now after seeing how good the Delta economy experience was, it is time for Spirit, which is known to be the worst airline in all of America.
So after getting the check-in email, I was brought to the main site before being offered money to skip my flight, which obviously I decided to pass on. After that, I was prompted with a bunch of add-ons for purchase, which I also passed on before agreeing to having no hazardous materials. And surprisingly, that is all I had to do because I was all checked in and ready to go. And surprisingly, I think Spirit's check-in was a little bit better than Delta's.
Now, I'm not gonna get my hopes up because I've had a smooth check-in process with Spirit before, only to get slapped with a 5-hour delay. But now that we're all checked in, we're gonna head inside the terminal, get our boarding pass so we can see what Spirit Airlines is actually like. And fingers crossed, it isn't gonna be a terrible experience.
So after making my way inside and down the escalators, I arrived at the main check-in area for Spirit. As you can see, Spirit is pretty strict with bags, and if you exceed these limits, you're gonna need to pay extra, but luckily I was traveling light. Making my way to the kiosk, all I had to do was put in my booking reference before confirming my information, and after agreeing to having nothing dangerous, I printed my boarding pass out and I was ready to go.
Alright, so I was able to get the boarding pass without any issues, which was super good because literally yesterday I flew Spirit and for some reason there was a whole issue and the customer service was terrible. And surprisingly this time I got TSA pre-check, which means I could go through security in literally 2 seconds. So we're gonna do that right now and then we're gonna head to the gate.
And thank God I got TSA pre-check because this was the line for normal security, but luckily I was able to go in this special line. And before I knew it, I was through security and into the terminal.
Surprisingly today I haven't been double inspected by security, which is a shock because it always happens to me. So now that we're through TSA and all that, apparently there's a lounge, so I'm gonna go check that out because I definitely need it before flying on Spirit.
So after boarding the airport transit, I made my way to the other side of the airport to check out the Club ATL. Making my way inside, there was pretty decent space for seating and a nice bar, but it was also extremely busy and the only food available was snacks like off-brand M&Ms or trail mix, and overall the food situation was pretty terrible.
That lounge gets a solid 4 out of 10. The staff were pretty nice, but it was incredibly busy. The food was pretty terrible. There was basically no selection, and everything was also extremely dated. But anyways, my flight is now supposed to board in I think 20 minutes, so I'm gonna tell you guys some of the reviews about Spirit just so you can understand why people say they're so bad.
Right off the bat, there are articles written about Spirit saying it's trying to make its flying experience less terrible since they are tied with Frontier to be the worst airline in America. That's because they are one of 3 airlines to draw the most passenger complaints, have been caught on social media trying to fix their plane with duct tape, and things are so bad that air travelers say they should avoid flying with Spirit Airlines, but it gets worse. Skytrax gave Spirit a 2 out of 10, while TripAdvisor gave them a 3 out of 5. But with more terrible reviews than every other category, I'm sure you want to hear what the people have to say. Right off the bat, our first customer was bullied by their friends for flying Spirit, another had their suitcase damaged without compensation, one had their flight canceled getting no customer service to help them, and someone even said they were straight up terrible. But probably my favorite reviews of all were people complaining about predatory policies, saying they are the worst airline ever, and best of all, this person who called them the McDonald's of airlines. So now that we know what we're in for and all the things people have said, let's go and fly Spirit to see how they compare to Delta. This is going to be interesting. So after making my way back to the main terminal, it was time to look for my gate when I noticed a mass of angry customers. This was because our flight had been delayed since the incoming plane hadn't arrived, and after waiting around for a while, it finally showed up and it was time to board.
How you doing? Good, you? There we go. Thank you. Have a good one. Time for the Spirit Airlines experience. Slightly terrified.
Now, considering I was boarding a flight full of angry people, this was going to be interesting, and I wasn't prepared for what was gonna happen later in this flight. But before getting to that, I made my way onto the plane and through the cabin, towards my seat where I'd be sitting for today's flight. Right off the bat, doing the initial comfort test, this seat was definitely on the stiffer side, and compared to Delta, it was way worse. Making my way under the seat, surprisingly there was a ton of room, and I'm pretty sure there was even more than Delta, but there was no power adapter. Making my way back to the seat, there was a solid amount of legroom, which surprised me since it was more than Delta, but unlike that seat which actually reclined, on Spirit, this seat was not gonna do it. Making my way to the overhead, it was nice to see the lighting and air conditioning working, and even though there was a pretty solid amount of space for bags in the bins, it still appears that Delta is able to fit a little bit more. Anyways, at this point, it was now 6:14, and we were supposed to have been in the air by now, but finally the flight was all boarded, and soon enough we were pushing back from the gate and making our way towards the runway. For today's second flight, I was going to be flying from Atlanta back to Florida, but this time to Fort Lauderdale, and soon after making it to the runway, it was time for takeoff. Now that I was in the air, I decided to check out the seats some more, starting with the in-flight entertainment. Spirit decided to take a more ancient approach, giving passengers the option of reading the safety pamphlet instead of the amazing in-flight entertainment that Delta had. Now, along with the safety pamphlet was someone's old tissue from the flight before, which was absolutely disgusting, and clearly this shows that they didn't do the best cleanup job. Anyways, now that we were in the air, they began the in-flight service, but there was one problem. Compared to Delta, where I got a free drink and snacks, everything on Spirit costs extra, including water. And the only free food on the entire flight was this leftover gum on the seat in front of me, so I decided to pass. But just in case that you were to buy food, I decided to check out the tray table, which was quite tiny, especially when I was comparing it to what I had on my Delta flight from earlier. Now at this point in the flight, my back was getting extremely sore from the seat, so I decided to check out the bathroom, which appeared to be half decent. And honestly, I'd say it was probably the same quality as the one on Delta. But anyways, after getting back to my seat, the only thing left to check out was the Wi-Fi. So after scanning the QR code, I was brought to the Spirit website, where I was prompted to pay $7.99 if I wanted to use it, which is way worse than the free Wi-Fi that Delta offers. But now that I was done checking this out, I noticed we had begun our descent into Fort Lauderdale, and soon enough we were coming in for landing. Now, I'm sure you thought this was the end of it, but for some reason, these idiots decided to stand up yelling at the flight attendants while we taxied to the gate. But eventually, we made it, so I guess one question remains. Which is actually the better airline? Well, for my flight on Delta, I paid $150 one way, while Spirit, I only paid $30. And even though it was way cheaper, I would still pick Delta every single day of the week. And if you enjoyed this video, watch one of these next where I flew even more airlines in a head-to-head.